What's up again, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and welcome to my very first own Versus Series matchup. Now, I've actually noticed online that a lot of hardcore Star Wars fans like to make matchups of their own, pitting their favorite Jedis or Sith against each other, but since I'm a big gamer fan, I decided I was going to pit together some of my favorite video game characters from certain series. So, to start off real simple, with one of my all-time favorite franchises, Final Fantasy, I will be pitting Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII against Seifer from Final Fantasy VIII. Please enjoy. Before his fall from grace, Sephiroth was one of the most revered and successful warriors of the Shinra Electric Power Company's soldier program. A great warrior idolized by the public and infantryman alike for his strength and discipline in combat, Sephiroth's many successes in the field of battle during the conflict surrounding the Shinra Electric Power Company's bid for global domination led to his status as a celebrity war hero and the poster boy for both the Shinra military and the company's soldier program. After learning the truth behind his origins and coming to believe that he was the only remaining survivor of the ancients, Sephiroth rebelled against the Shinra Electric Power Company and enacted a worldwide vendetta against the corruption of mankind. His ultimate goal was to take control of the life stream and with its power and knowledge become a godlike being. After discovering the remains of his mother Jenova inside of a Mako reactor, it was here that Sephiroth would face the newly promoted soldier Zack. However, after Sephiroth quickly dispatched Zack, knocking him out, he was stabbed in the back moments later by Cloud Strife, a simple infantryman trying to rise to the rank of soldier. However, badly injured, Sephiroth decapitated Jenova and engaged Cloud Strife once again, but quickly impaled him onto his blade. However, Cloud Strife, now infused with Mako energy, was able to survive Sephiroth's attack and managed to overpower Sephiroth, convincing him to jump into the lifestream itself along with the head of Jenova. Sephiroth would make his numerous returns in order to continue his plan to destroy the world, but would be defeated each and every time by the forces of Cloud Strife and his allies. In a spin-off appearance, Sephiroth is depicted as Cloud Strife's arch enemy and is seen as a symbol of Cloud's troubled past that haunts his life. Seifer was one of the many orphans that was raised by the sorceress Edea. After becoming of age, he along with his fellow orphans were transferred to Balam Garden to begin their training to become Seeds, which is a special mercenary force created by Sid and Edea Kramer. Over the course of his training, he would develop a fierce rivalry with his fellow Seed trainee, Squall Leonhardt. Their rivalry would grow over the years to the point that during a sparring match, he wounded and scarred Squall across the face, only to receive a similar scar just moments later. During a Seed exam to Dalat, Seifer was put in command of Squad B, which consists of Squall, Leonhardt, and Zell, and was given specific orders to stand by and eliminate any Galabanian soldiers they encountered. However, Seifer soon realized the boredom of standing by and chose instead to pursue the group of soldiers heading for a nearby communications tower, abandoning his team. Because of this, he failed his exam and was not given the rank of Seed. After these events, Seifer would be recruited by Sorceress Edea to serve as her personal bodyguard. Over the course of his employment to Edea, he would be given several assignments which involved leading the attack on Balam Garden, kidnapping Renoa and sacrificing her to an all-power future entity named Ultimacia, who turned out to be controlling Edea and himself as well. When Squall Leonhardt and his fellow allies defeated Ultimacia, her control over Edea and Seifer faded away. Last we see of Seifer, he is fishing alongside his two friends, looking forward to what awaits him in his future. Now, I would like to state right now that for this particular versus battle, I will be using Sephiroth as he was in Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, as there have been a number of interpretations of this character which all seem to have similar qualities, but unique elements showing the amount of skill level or approach that he will use in a battle. That being said, this Sephiroth can be classified as a young human male in his early to mid-20s, standing 6'2". During the circumstances involving his creation, Sephiroth was given superhuman strength and speed. These abilities allowed him to move his body in incredible ways, along with being able to jump great distances and heights. Though one element that has seems to be constant over the course of his life is that Sephiroth is, to some level, able to take a great deal of damage. This was shown during the event in which Cloud Strife was able to impale Sephiroth using Zack's Buster Sword and gravely wounded him. Though this did not kill Sephiroth, he was able to gather himself and impale Cloud twice with his blade. The only singular move that has been able to take down Sephiroth has been Cloud Strife's Omi Slash attack, which can be classified as an incredibly fast and series of power strikes capable of dealing devastating damage with each strike. Now, Seifer too can be classified as a young human male standing 6'2" at the age of 18. Due to his training to become a member of Seeds, it is clear that Seifer is in great shape for someone being so young. However, being so young, I can't really say that he is at his apex, but he is getting there. Now, I was actually able to come up with a set of stats for both characters, but I did have to cheat a little bit. While replaying Final Fantasy VII for research, I reached a section of the game where you can control Sephiroth, and during this time I was able to look at his status and discovered that he at that point in time was at level 50, his HP being 3,264, his strength being 78, his vitality being 128, his magic being 78, and his luck being 46. Now, when comparing Seifer's status, I realized that both Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII use two different status and leveling up systems, obviously. So to help Seifer out a little bit, I took his stats from his peak of level 100, and for that I was able to declare that Seifer has an HP of 4,187, his strength is 47, his vitality is 41, his magic is 45, and his luck is 22. Now, just from the simple numbers, I think we can all agree who would win this round. The edge goes to Sephiroth, not just from the simple numbers, but from my own personal viewpoint. He is simply stronger, faster, and capable of achieving far greater physical capabilities that Seifer really has no clear answer to. Although I am willing to give Seifer a little credit, acknowledging that he is in good shape for a young man of his age, Sephiroth was created to be simply superior to any normal man, which outclasses Seifer in every way. Edge, Sephiroth. Now, before I begin, I would like to state right now that I will not be acknowledging Sephiroth as he is portrayed in the Kingdom Hearts franchise, as that version of Sephiroth is a completely different animal entirely. I am focusing on strictly how he is portrayed in the Final Fantasy VII franchise. And unfortunately for Sephiroth, it doesn't appear that he ever liked using magical abilities in combat. Instead, he seemed to rely on his pure swordsmanship, wishing to best his opponents through sheer blade work. Though his status does range his magic abilities rather high, the fact that he rarely used them in combat is a crippling weakness. The only time Sephiroth has ever been seen using any form of magical abilities in combat was during his fight against Genesis and NGL. During this fight, once Sephiroth had successfully fended off a series of multiple long-range fire attacks by Genesis, he was able to power through with a powerful, concentrated series of what I like to call laser blade strikes. However, these laser blade strikes seem to be easily countered with a simple slash to each blade. Seifer, on the other hand, has a number of special magical abilities that all have various uses during his engagements. During his sparring match against Squall, Seifer used a powerful up-close fire blast to temporarily disable Squall, leaving him open to a cut to the face by Seifer's gunblade. He also has the use of 3 limit breakers named No Mercy, Bloodfest, and Demon Slice, and for these reasons I have to give the edge to Seifer, simply because he possesses a number of very powerful and useful magical techniques and is far more willing to use them in combat. I would even go so far as to say that Seifer's limit breakers are exactly the type of attacks that would be greatly effective against Sephiroth. And although they are not multiple hit kills that could take down Sephiroth like Cloud's Omi Slash or even Squall's Lionheart Strike, if Seifer can make any one of these attacks connect and hit Sephiroth, then Sephiroth is going to have a very difficult time fighting on effectively. Edge, Seifer. The Masamune was named after a legendary Japanese swordsman and is probably one of the longest blades of its kind ever made. Now, numerous sources tend to debate on exactly how long Sephiroth's model of the Masamune really was, but the official length it seems to be ranged between is 6 to 8 feet long. So for this particular matchup, I decided to pick 7 feet. The Masamune is an extremely unique sword and powerful in the correct hands, and Sephiroth wielded the Masamune with terrific precision, great strength, and speed. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any concrete information on exactly what was the best way to use this weapon, so what comes up next are my own personal theories. Sephiroth's blade itself seemed to have a special dark ability that enabled the sword to instantly kill anyone that was stabbed by this weapon, though few people like Cloud, Zack, and Tifa were somehow able to survive being struck by this weapon. Due to its length, it is my belief that this sword was not best used at close range, as evident in his fights against Cloud, Angel, and Genesis. Due to Sephiroth's exceptional skill with the blade, however, he was able to mount a good defense at close range for a short time, but had to immediately jump away in order to increase the range. So this tells me that this sword is meant to be used to keep enemies at a distance using a one-handed method for speed, and when forced to fight up close, could be used with a two-handed method for up close defense and a decent use of power strikes. Seifer wielded the gunblade model named the Hyperon. The weapon itself was measured at about 3.5 feet long, and as opposed to other gunblade models like the types used by Squall Leonhard, this model was better used as a fencing weapon, allowing it to be exceptionally good for using close-range techniques and strikes. The gun handle allowed this weapon to fit better into the palm, allowing for much better control of the weapon's movements. The trigger mechanism built into the weapon was used to send a shockwave through the blade itself, allowing the user to incorporate power strikes within their maneuvers without affecting the amount of momentum needed to power through defenses. Due to the weapon's blade design, it is evident that the weapon was also able to deflect power strikes in opposing directions, allowing for proper protection for the user. Though the blade itself is not very thick, it was mostly used for quick slashes and short precision piercing moves. It did allow the user to use a minimum amount of energy against an array of attacks. A user could also hold the blade by the tip of the blade, allowing for users to withstand powerful power strikes, as well as providing more options in combat and maximum defense for the user and the weapon itself. Comparing these two weapons against each other is rather difficult. Sephiroth's Masamune is a very intimidating weapon because of its overall look, but in combat it does have a balanced amount of strengths and weaknesses. This weapon could deliver a one-hit kill to almost everyone that was stabbed by this weapon, but its clear weakness was that this weapon could only use power strikes at close range, and is best used for speed at long ranges, which means that Sephiroth had to switch techniques depending on the distance he was from his opponent in battle. Due to the length of the weapon itself, even for someone as tall as Sephiroth, it made it completely impossible for him to incorporate many useful up-close defensive blocks. Also, he had never been able to power his way through an opponent's defenses for the most part, and the only time he's ever been shown powering through an opponent's defense was when his opponent was tired and their defenses were not as strong at that particular point in the fight. While Seifer's weapon is not a one-hit kill weapon, due to the trigger mechanism, it can combine speed and power all at once, allowing for excellent defense at close range against standard and power strikes, along with allowing the user to exert a small amount of energy with the fighting maneuvers, allowing them to engage combat for a very long period of time. And for these reasons, I declare Sephiroth's Masamune and Seifer's Hyperon's Gunblade even in terms of weapons. Now, in order to create a believable sense of both Sephiroth and Seifer's fighting tactics, I chose to use Star Wars lightsaber fighting forms. Now, after closely studying all the visual sources I could on Sephiroth, if his sword skills could be compared to lightsaber fighting forms, he would most likely be specialized in Form 5 Xian or the Gemso, Form 4 Ataru, and Form 7 Juyon. Sephiroth was more than capable of going head-to-head with any opponent with a good balance of speed and power with his strikes, and within all his fights he's been shown to be able to block and immediately counterattack for a long period of time. However, if Sephiroth realizes that he's having difficulty holding his ground or powering through his opponent's defenses, he will resort to using Ataru by jumping around to multiple points around an opponent with fast-paced strikes in order to throw his opponents off balance. Finally, once Sephiroth realizes that his opponent's defense is at a minimum or their stamina is low, he'll go completely for a total offense with a Juyon Frenzy in order to finish off his opponents quickly. Due to his high level of stamina due to the experiments that created him, he could hold up all of these different offenses for a long period of time. Despite the fact that both Ataro and Juyon are highly powerful offensive forms that require the user to exert massive amounts of energy and stamina to keep the effectiveness of the form at their peak, Sephiroth was also keen at using the environment to his advantage, taking the fight to a location of his choice and planning his moves out ahead. Sephiroth could also integrate physical strikes into his sword maneuvers, but would only use this once his opponent's defenses or stamina were at an all-time low. He could also take advantage of opponents' openings within their own fighting techniques and use precision sword strikes to damage his opponents. The best example I could find showing off Sephiroth's battle tactics was in the film adaptation of Final Fantasy VII Advent Children Complete. In the beginning of the fight between Cloud Strife and Sephiroth, he would have declared that in a straight head-to-head fight, Cloud Strife could match him blow for blow in terms of power and speed. Once he tried to overpower Cloud, he realized that Cloud was a lot stronger than himself, and it was at this time that Sephiroth, using his advanced physical abilities, jumped from location to location, leading the fight to a predetermined location on the side of the Shinra Company building. Sephiroth proceeded to cut the top section of the building down, now forcing Cloud to divide his concentration between cutting through debris, jumping through debris, countering all of Sephiroth's sword strikes, and keeping aware of how close he was to the ground while in a constant state of falling. Once Cloud chose to break off the engagement and take a small breather, Sephiroth appeared and using a full-out Juyon assault was able to knock Cloud through a wall, compelling Cloud to use one of his special attacks to leap into the air, giving Sephiroth the opening he needed to insert a well-timed precision impalement. In the same manner, if Seifer's techniques could be compared to lightsaber fighting forms, then the two forms that he would be specialized in would be Form 2 Makashi and Form 6 Naiman. Due to the nature of his weapon being held with only one hand, it is clear that Seifer would be classified as a speed fencer. Seifer was also keen in incorporating magical abilities into his sword sequences, which is where Form 6 Naiman comes into play. One of the best natural talents that Seifer had with his fighting style was the ability to actually deflect power strikes and control the direction of an opponent's blade. Seifer's set of skills do seem to keep him prepared for almost any scenario. If an opponent tries to go head-to-head with him using his Makashi style and the advantage of Seifer's gunblade enabling Seifer to overcome one of Makashi's prime weaknesses, it would allow him to outfence almost any opponent, leaving them open to magical strikes. If an opponent, however, keeps their distance, all Seifer would need to do is hold his ground and fire off magical projectiles, forcing his opponents to close the distance to stop Seifer's magical assault. However, due to the lack of discipline Seifer has, he does have a tendency to get cocky and allow openings in his fighting style, which can be considered Seifer's only real serious weakness. In this contest of comparing battle tactics between the two, I would have to give Sephiroth the edge. Seifer's battle tactics better prepare him to face nearly any scenario that is presented to him. He has all his bases covered, being able to fight effectively at close range with his sword skills and effectively at long ranges with his magical abilities. But the problem is that with his lack of discipline, it completely undermines his tactics and makes him present openings in his defense that his opponents can and will take advantage of. And compared to Sephiroth in a physical sense, he can't afford to make these mistakes. In Sephiroth's case, he may not know as many tricks and abilities as Seifer. His fighting tactics do give him the option to experiment and change up his tactics on the fly, and on a physical level, he can actually afford to make mistakes or use an out-of-the-box technique that Seifer really would not be familiar with. Even going so far as Sephiroth can plan out his battles on the fly and lure his opponent into making a mistake of their own, giving him the opening Sephiroth would need to win. Edge, Sephiroth. I'm sure that a lot of Final Fantasy fanboys and girls may see this, and believe it or not, this would actually turn out to be a pretty good fight. But at the end of the day, I would have to say that Sephiroth would win. The reason being is that Sephiroth's edge of being physically superior in his ability to plan out his fights and study his opponent's techniques on the fly is far more effective than Seifer's large variety of magical abilities, which is his only real edge. And Seifer's range of magical abilities would be completely useless because Sephiroth is not going to be standing still. Using his Ataro style of fighting, Sephiroth would be able to jump great distances and maneuver around the battlefield better. Seifer is simply reacting to the situation as it presents itself, but would be unable to switch his tactics, and after a period of time, Sephiroth's ability to study his opponent's techniques would allow him to know exactly what Seifer will do before he does it, allowing Sephiroth to have complete control of the fight itself. However, due to Seifer's Makashi-style fighting, in his unique design and functions of the Seifer's gunblade, Sephiroth would be unable to simply overpower Seifer in a straight-up fight. And within all of his fights, it has been shown that he is unable to overpower any opponent regardless of skill level, and has only been seen overpowering an enemy once their stamina was down, and the fight between these two I doubt would last that long for either combatants to reach that level of stamina. From my point of view, I believe this fight would play out like this. The two would engage in a straight-up sword fight, and after a small period of time, Seifer's fighting style and weapon would eventually find a way to slightly cause a small minimum injury or cut to Sephiroth, but nothing too serious, forcing Sephiroth to jump back to keep his distance. As Sephiroth begins to jump around Seifer, the two would engage in a long-range projectile fight, Sephiroth throwing a series of laser blade strikes at Seifer, while Seifer begins firing off his large variety of magical abilities. Due to the nature of Sephiroth's laser blade strikes, Seifer would have no problem repelling all of Sephiroth's while being able to counter immediately with his own magical abilities, with this Nine-Man style of fighting being specialized in incorporating magical strikes into his sword maneuvers, and in this contest I'm sure Seifer would be able to pick up on Sephiroth's movements and speed timing and would eventually get a direct hit knocking Sephiroth to the ground, and it is at this point I believe the fight would end one of two ways. Either Sephiroth gets up and gets very pissed off and goes all out with a complete offense with a Form 7 Julian assault, sacrificing everything to boost offense, and in this contest I do believe Seifer would be able to deliver a devastating stab blow into Sephiroth's body, in which Sephiroth would immediately grab the blade itself, preventing Seifer from retrieving his weapon, and at such a close range, Sephiroth would simply be able to cut Seifer down right then and there, with Seifer being unable to dodge the speed of Sephiroth's strikes at such a close range without his gunblade. Sephiroth would be more than able to take the extra punishment to ensure that he could deliver a death blow. Or, the second way that I could see this fight ending is after Sephiroth has been hit by one of Seifer's magical strikes and knocked to the ground, Sephiroth could choose to play possum and allow Seifer to get up close, giving off the impression that he is down and defeated. And once Seifer sets up for a final finishing death blow, Sephiroth would immediately apply a backwards hand impalement, killing Seifer right then and there. Bottom line, Sephiroth's physical superiority and mastery of his battle tactics are more than Seifer would be able to handle. I'm willing to state that Seifer does have the sword skills and magical variety to beat someone like Sephiroth, but his lack of discipline and his inability to plan ahead and take control of the fight make it impossible for him to win. Note that if we gave Seifer, say, a good 10 years to develop himself much more as a professional fighter, both physically and mentally, then I do believe Sephiroth would have a run for his money. Now, if I could use, say, a hit ratio in terms of how many strikes each person would have to deliver in order to win this fight, I'd say Seifer would need, say, 6 to 8 direct hits in order to take down Sephiroth. However, Sephiroth would only need to hit Seifer with one good move. However, I can't really see Sephiroth walking away from this one uninjured, and he would take quite a beating and probably feel this one in the morning, or need to take some painkillers. I declare Sephiroth the victor. Whew! I must say that this was one of the hardest videos I've ever had to put together, and I look forward to continuing these Versus videos for the future. I would like to thank the YouTuber Jen Sarai for inspiring the Versus model that I plan to change up and use for my own Versus matchups. And please remember that this outcome was my own personal opinion, and feel free to respond in the comments down below if you believe the outcome of the fight would have played out differently. Feel free to also like, comment down below, and please subscribe to keep track of me in my future movie, video game reviews, and future Versus series episodes. Thank you guys for watching, and now here's a small preview of my next Versus series matchup.
You too, immortal.
No, I just don't fear death. I'm a prisoner of death. Only you can free me.